Hey everyone, welcome to the M365 Pulse. I am still alive and I'm joined with my better counterparts of Tom and
Yay.
Tamara here today. So there's the three of us. Jen sends her love. If you're new or a returning visitor, doesn't matter either way. Here in the M365 Pulse, we go through and review our favorite updates to the roadmap that goes on and happens each week. So all of us are industry people that have been working in it for a while, for decades, I guess, at this point for all of us,
Way too long.
and both love and hate what we do. But for better or for worse, we're very much embedded in the world of Microsoft and M365, and we kind of found out over time that being aware of what's coming in the roadmap both keeps us excited about new things for our job, but helps us be prepared for change and stuff too. So that's the purpose of this. Excited to have you guys along for the journey. As always, we are going to go through the four sections of the roadmap. It starts with end development, which is the very beginning, which basically means Microsoft has announced their intention to develop this feature, and it's somewhere in the development process. From end development, it goes into rolling out. That means it's somewhere in the very, very complicated release chain cycle of Microsoft. This can be from private preview all the way up to general release, but it just means it's somewhere in that process. Some customers are actually working with it to some degree. You then go to launch, which is at that point, it should be general availability and everyone have access to the feature. And finally, from time to time, they have canceled features. So as always, we're going to start with in development, which is the new features that have been added in. And I'm going to go ahead and look to Tom to start us off, Tom.
Yes. Well, she said she had a few highlighted, and I only had a few highlighted because everything else was Adam material. So I'm going to take one of them, and we'll see if she takes the other one. So Microsoft lists a new form experience to collect information. So this was something that got announced at the SharePoint conference, which is occurring in Vegas this week. And there's a lot of changes that they're making in lists, one of which is the experience for creating a form to collect the information that goes into a list is been updated and it's much more appealing. You've always had the option to say, hey, default SharePoint list form, puts that little column down the right-hand side of the screen, and it just looks but ugly. It's not very attractive. There's not a whole lot of customization you can do. It's just like, here it is, live with it. You're good to go. Now they're doing something that almost looks Microsoft Forms like, in the fact that you have a pop-up that happens right in the middle of the screen. It's not over to the side, and you've got the ability to hide fields, and you've got a nice title, and you've got a logo there, and it actually looks like a forms collection device. I can see a lot of people probably not wanting to use Microsoft Forms to collect information, especially if your ultimate goal is to send it to SharePoint. Just go ahead and make this SharePoint list form and send it directly to the list, and you're good to go. They haven't released a lot of information as to what it's going to be able to do. A lot of us in the industry are holding out hopes that it'd be nice if you could say, well, if this value is here, don't show this field down there. Don't know that we're going to get that. God, it would be nice.
Branching. We
Yeah,
want branching.
branching. The other one, people going, will this allow you to specify different types of forms for a list item based on things? Like, if it does, I'm not doing Power Apps on anything at this point. I'm like, here's your form if it's in new status. Here's your form if it's in process status. Here's your form if it's in completed status. We'll see when that comes out. It's not due until October. But again, that's going to be a significant change, if nothing more than for the aesthetics of what that form is going to look like when you're calling stuff up and putting stuff into a list without having to go to Power Apps. So
Great. All right,
Tamara?
Microsoft Teams collaborative stage view. So with the collaborative stage view, app content opens in a new Teams window where users can engage with content and chat with other team members side by side. So the collaboration stage lets users share links and collaborate on content right from within Teams. So that is supposed to be released in May, and it's coming out to everybody.
Yeah, I actually think this is great. This is essentially like co-authoring type stuff in real time, but in a Teams meeting, which like I've
Mhm.
done at various points before where you're having a meeting to talk about something and it's like, okay, well, you're all going in and looking at the same document. But the fact that you can essentially have someone presenting and be going in and doing that, I think that this is a step in the right direction for especially like remote work and
Yeah.
being more collaborative and working together and stuff. This is taking tools that already had some of that collaborative functionality and enhancing them by tying feature sets into other stuff you're already using. So I was actually super excited to see this one. I could see this being actually a pretty big benefit.
Yeah, it does look good. The other one that I like was in PowerPoint, and that's camera source selection and toggle available in slideshow and presenter view. So you can change the camera source and turn on and off the camera within the PowerPoint slideshow and presenter view in the desktop. So that's coming out in June, and that's coming out to everybody too.
There's one I'll touch on before we turn it over to Adam, probably for Purview United. um, Outlook message reminders. Outlook will surface emails to the top of your inbox when we detect a reply is still needed. Now, I saw this earlier today on roadmap entries that came out, and it was basically for the mobile device. But it looks like based on this suggestion or this entry here, it's also going to hit your laptop or your, device that you're using anywhere. It did mention in the other one that this can be turned off, which I think a lot of people are going to want to do because you're not going to want to have 14,000 emails go whoop right up to the top of your screen because, oh, I think you need to do something with this. On the flip side, it's very easy to go what I call below the scroll, where it's like, oh, I've got to get to that. And all of a sudden it drops below what you see without scrolling. And it might as well not even exist anymore.
Oh,
You
you know,
miss it.
100%. I probably average over 100 emails a day that come into my inbox.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I just miss stuff from time to time, or even stuff that I may have seen. And I'm like, oh, I'll get back to that later. And I don't remember to go back.
Exactly.
I love this feature when I saw it. Like, in my head, I think of this the same as I don't know exactly how this will work, but like, if you have the word attach or attachment in your email, be like, hey, did you forget to
Yes,
attach
yes.
something? And like that has saved me multiple times. I see this as a good way of like, oh, hey, like, in this message, someone had asked if you could get back to them by the end of the week. The end of the week's coming back and you haven't sent a reply. Like, I
Exactly.
could see something like that as being wonderful. I also see this as this is not exactly the same, but these are the small little quality of life things that I'm hoping is stuff more like AI and artificial intelligence get involved. That's the type of stuff that improves. The big, cool, large leaping stuff it can do is really cool too. But stuff like this is almost like having an assistant without having an assistant in a way that, like,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not important enough to have an assistant at my job, but
Right.
having something that can just go through and remind me and stuff like that, I am sure will make me more responsive than I am right now in certain degrees and make me ostensibly better at my job. So I thought this was really cool. I'll accept all the help I can get there.
I think Jen would call this a delighter.
Yes, very much so. Well, I'm seeing more and more when you look at articles on Chat GPT, and it's going to happen too with Copilot with all the stuff that's coming out there, is you've got people who are rank and file individuals, and they're like, I'm spending $20 a month on Chat GPT, and it's like I've hired an assistant
Mm-hmm.
that saves me anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours a day. And I'm so much more productive, and nobody knows the difference.
Right.
Cool. Knock yourself out. Go for it. So,
So both that feature and the collaborative stage view were two non-nerdy ones I thought were super cool, but we've discussed both of those. A large section of the in development for the left here is all stuff that's compliance purview updates. I've discussed this a couple times when we've gone through and talked about it. They continue to make strides here on improving what they're going through and doing. Honestly, with the development of some of the continued stuff they're doing with AI and machine learning, these are some of the areas that are going to get better just because these are some of the areas that data ingestion and processing can help so much with. So being able to go through and consume and understand a lot of stuff. I'm not going to go through all of the updates. There's a ton of stuff that they are going through and doing related to both eDiscovery Premium as well as insider risk management. I always think the insider risk management stuff is super cool because it's the type of stuff that I see this as a real differentiator for Microsoft, specifically with small and medium customers. Maybe super large customers could afford like a premium product that might go through and do this. But if you're a company that has 100 or so less people, you're not implementing a technology that's going in and looking for insider risk stuff. And to give you an idea, one of the updates that they're doing that I just thought was so cool, it was, let me see if I can find it again. It was peer group anomaly detection. So what this basically means is Microsoft will go in and compare people that have a similar job title or are on the same team or do similar job functions with what they're going through and doing. So let's say Tom and I work together. We are both M365 admins for our organization. And so we both have the same manager listed. We both have the same job title. And we tend to hit the same SharePoint sites and teams and stuff like that. So it will basically build up an algorithm of that type of stuff that they're going through and doing and say, hey, Adam and Tom are fairly similar in their behaviors and what their expectations are and what they go through and do. Well, suddenly, if then I start going to a whole bunch of sites that I haven't been before and downloading a whole bunch of content, that could be a sign that maybe I'm thinking about leaving and trying to just go in and take what intellectual property I can with me or what information. And so it's going to start doing stuff like that with the elevation of AI and machine learning to go through and extrapolate data together to try to help give insightful information to detect asynchronous behavior. The other thing that I think is not even necessarily brought up here that could be beneficial too, it could also very much be that everything I said is true about me and Tom, and I start going through and dealing with other stuff, and I'm dealing with other stuff because now I have some new function of my job I'm going through and doing. Well, if this thing triggers on that, it could be entirely innocent and I'm not doing anything wrong, but that could potentially be a sign if you know what you're doing to, hey, maybe this person's job title should change, or maybe we need a role that does this specifically, and maybe Adam's the right person to fill it. Maybe we need to hire that, let Adam get back to his core duties. Regardless, I think the idea that they're, again, leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence and really data consumption in a large way to go through and provide some of these insights in a way that a company that was less than 100 people could have never done 2 years ago, I think is actually super, super cool, and like to see the developments coming through with that.
And especially when you look at the fact that startups are historically small.
Yeah.
And they don't have the money to be able to spend on that kind of stuff, but usually they're doing something that's cutting edge, bleeding edge. And
they're at the most risk to stuff like that.
Exactly. So what you said makes a whole lot of sense.
And like I said, like to me, if you are a company like that or a small startup, like, don't get me wrong, like we joke Office 365 is getting more and more expensive as they add more features to it. You know, pretty soon it's going to be, okay, your monthly payment of $200 for your Office 365 license. But at the same time, the level of raw value that it's bringing that not only provides collaboration platforms and tools for you to do, but starts doing stuff like this, that's not even touching on the stuff that, you know, if you're a startup that's working in a regulated industry, like you probably don't have the, you know, data analyst and the compliance professionals that you really probably want. So having tools that help to guide you in that and help point you in the right direction, like all of that stuff is so valuable. I think Microsoft is doing right on their own to invest in this type of stuff because it basically makes them way more irreplaceable than just a company that does IT services, you know?
Well, yeah, and I'm sure there's a few crypto firms who kind of wish they had insider risk management things in place, and they probably wouldn't have ended up facing, you know, extradition and long jail sentences and everything else because
you mean
they melted
FTX
down.
approving expenses with emojis on Slack?
I've never heard those initials before. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we just keep it in TurboTax over there. It's not a problem.
A billion-dollar company. All right, you guys ready to move to rolling out?
I am.
Yep.
Tamara, why don't you take us away since Tom had to go first last time?
Sure. Outlook for Windows. Signature cloud settings.
Yay.
I'm so happy about this. Your signature settings are going to be stored in the cloud, so your experience is consistent when you access Outlook for Windows on any computer.
Plus
this
Outlook
feature
on the web,
is now available to 50% of the current channel.
Yeah, because I
And
usually have
that's
to go
only
and set,
coming out for commercial though.
yeah, I usually have to go and set my, my information on the client. Then I have to go and set the information on the cloud-based one. I'm like, can we just keep it all in one place there? Because come on, please. So
Cool.
is that
Tom,
it
what
for
about
you?
you?
Wow. So Microsoft Stream, because that's taking up all my time now.
Yeah, I was about to say, as soon as I saw Stream, I was like, Tom's going to talk about that.
Yeah, it's like I only have 3 migrations going now. Why not? Not a problem. Timeline markers in Teams meeting recordings for when a screen was shared. As painful as this migration is going to be and listening to the particular calls on the migration stuff, the word dumpster fire comes into my mind here. But they are fortunately adding a lot of features into the SharePoint or the stream in SharePoint and OneDrive that surpasses what you had in Stream Classic. And one of them is this, and they're adding markers, which appears icon above the video timelines in Teams, meeting recordings timelines to indicate when a screen was shared in the meeting. The markers help you see who shared the screen at what moment and to easily jump right to that part of the meeting. Anything that you can do to see what's happening and skip right to it instead of having to sit through 35 minutes of a meeting that you didn't want to be in the first place is great. Now, the only unfortunate piece of this is this feature is only available for customers who have purchased the Microsoft Teams Premium add-on offering, which is really expensive. So as much as you might like to see that, there's a good chance you won't. But keep in mind that that is something that if it's a killer feature for you, you can look at Microsoft Teams Premium in order to get that particular feature.
Cool. I have a couple things. I think this will be moderately short, but I think they're all worth mentioning. So first, they have in rolling out, this is probably in one of the sessions that Tom and Tamara did without me because I've been so busy in the last month, but now in rolling out is Microsoft 365 Admin Center Windows 365 Cloud PC Advanced Deployment Guide. What this basically means is if you are an admin and you go into the Admin Center, there will now be a very in-depth deployment guide recommendation that you can get for Windows 365. So this is basically Microsoft having put forth the effort to, more than just like a support doc that explains what it is, actually explain, here's how we recommend you deploy it, what you need to consider, what your experience should be like. They've done this with several products over time. They're always pretty good and pretty put together. But I love seeing this because Windows 365 is something that I think is going to be a huge deal 5 years from now. That I think like it's just starting to scratch the surface and we're not seeing it. Windows 365 is essentially a browser-based PC. It's
Right.
you go in and you get access to a Windows machine that's standalone, that's going in and doing stuff that you can just access through a browser. It's basically taking something like a virtual desktop or a remote desktop environment and simplifying it even more to make it more accessible. If you're doing remote desktop stuff and things like that right now, typically the people that are doing that are like developers that are going in and doing stuff. Or maybe if a company fully commits because they have data compliance issues or something they're wanting to do, but there's still a decent amount of heavy lifting, both on the configuration of the back end of what you're doing and just getting people comfortable with what you need to do. If you can turn all of that to just you access this through a browser, the world that Tamara and I live in, and even the world that Tom lives in with medical, do you know how much easier it is for me from a security and compliance standpoint to guarantee the data resiliency and data protection of my data if it's literally a system I control that the only way you can access it through is a web browser, that there's not, patient data sitting on someone's laptop in their house and, some random state somewhere. It's all in the web. And so I think the reason this hasn't blown up as much beforehand is one, it's still a new technology. They're just going to the point that they're getting some of the level of controls that you would expect to need, such as like Intune management and stuff like that. Excuse me. But going through and seeing them invest and do stuff like this, I think that that's coming. I think that very soon in the future, it's going to become a much more common situation of where a company gives people a relatively low-powered Chromebook or something like that that has the ability to go through and access the web and has what you need to do from there. And then they do all of their data resiliency and stuff either through an AVD system or potentially easier through something like Windows 365. And then again, from a security and compliance standpoint, that's 1,000 times easier. And also think about how much easier that makes when you have turnover and stuff like that. Again, like it just makes everything smoother when you're looking at it. I think 5 to 10 years from now, you potentially are even going to see that more commonly than people buying nice, expensive, powerful laptops for their users. That market will still exist. People will still want personal PCs and stuff like that. But I very much would expect the norm to be as, stuff like Chromebooks and tablets and stuff continue to get more powerful. You're going to see situations where your work environment entirely exists in the cloud, and it's something you're connecting to go in and do the work that you need.
I had a talk with my boss's boss last week, I think.
Grand
Poobah's, and he was mentioning that they're setting up this policy for people who leave the company. If they don't return their equipment, what the particular department's going to get charged, their cost center for this. And of course, the manager's like, "Oh my God, you can't do that. That's not our fault." It's like, you hired them, is your fault. And he threw numbers out at me. I'm like, you are kidding me that we have that much outstanding that we have a hard time recovering when a person leaves the company. And you figure if there's nothing for them to return and they're using their own computer to connect to whatever.
Even if you buy them a $300 tablet, you probably don't care if you don't get a $300 tablet back,
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like the $2,500 PC and the monitor
and let alone for an industry like you, the data that may be on that PC that exposes your company to all sorts of risk. And
so it surprised me how much that is costing. And if you go virtual on all your desktops, even Citrix, that really cuts back. You're spending more maybe on the infrastructure in the back end.
And part of the reason why people aren't doing Citrix today is it's fairly complicated. You need people that are experts in it. You need to know how to maintain the system and maintain the deployment. Windows 365 is basically the elementary school version of this that's going to make it a lot more acceptable to other people. So super cool concept behind it. One of the other two things to mention, this was also in the rolling out, they had a whole bunch of stuff like this, but in addition to some of the compliance stuff that they're continuing to develop, you're also starting to see a trend. If you read through this spreadsheet week after week, they're starting to get better at digesting and compartmentalizing the data that exists. So interestingly enough, if you were going in and doing stuff like e-discovery on things before, well, we had transcripts from Teams meetings that eventually got to the point that you go through and do it, but there was actually no audio recording or anything that was ever captured from Teams meetings. And before transcripts, you just knew a meeting took place. You didn't necessarily know what was going on there. They would keep the chat because that was a leftover of Skype, but until the transcript came about, which is, if you think about it, transcripts have only existed for about year and a half, 2 years now, would you say, Tom, as a default of going through and doing transcripts when you do recordings? Before then, you didn't even have that. They're now doing stuff, and there's stuff on the roadmap that say like, oh, cool, if you have a Teams meeting, they can go in and actually save audio recordings of that and put that in the e-discovery type stuff, so you have the ability to go in and even revisit what was said during the meeting and stuff like that. Stuff that honestly is good, and it's going to make companies better as far as backing up their data and making sure that they're doing stuff in a compliant manner, and stuff that you kind of expected to be there, but the technology framework didn't exist 5 years ago to do. So the fact that they're doing that, it's going to be doing stuff like being able to compartmentalize the content that happens in Teams meetings and stuff like that in a way that we couldn't really do before. So I just thought that's worth mentioning and kind of cool. The last one that I'll mention that I also thought was actually kind of cool as well, whenever I went through and looked at it, was the idea of doing virtual meetings. So this is a B2C concept, which is business to consumer. And it's a new thing that they're rolling out with Microsoft Teams that they're calling virtual appointments. So B2C is business to consumer. This is really going to be valuable for like small businesses, but it's basically a customized meeting for you when you're sending to someone externally to allow you to basically make it an easier join process. Now, funnily enough, the first thing I thought about this is right now, if something goes wrong with my dad's PC and it's urgent enough that like It's not that my brother can go over there tomorrow and help them. So like my parents were getting ready to go on vacation like 2 weeks ago, and I got a call on Thursday that the report my dad had worked on all day just somehow deleted itself. And I needed to
Somehow.
help him get it back. Yeah, of course. Like that's my dad's explanation. He's super frustrated at this point and just cussing, and I can't get him cut out on the phone. And so my first step is, all right, cool. Well, I need to get you on a Teams meeting so you can share your screen so I can get an idea of what's going on. And that process took 25 minutes. When
Oh,
you read
no.
through what they're going through and doing about the idea of these virtual appointments, it says virtual appointment is a new Teams meeting type tailored for business to consumer meetings with people outside of your organization. When using the meeting type, guests will get a meeting invitation that includes important appointment details to make joining easy. They can join from any device, no need to install Teams, and experience a comfortable pre-appointment virtual waiting room until you're ready to begin. This is basically tailored to invite people that are not part of your organization, that probably aren't familiar with Teams and familiar with happens, to make it easier on them. The first thing I thought of is, hey, this will make it easier for getting my dad doing what I need to do that. But very much, I'm sure if you own a company and you're doing appointments with people where you're meeting them virtually to talk to them, this is probably a reoccurring thing you have to go with too. Oh yeah, I sent you a Teams meeting. Oh no, you don't need to download the client, or you can. It makes it a little easier. Like the idea that again they're thinking about this and developing it, I just thought it was cool.
Cool.
And then
So,
finally we go to launch. If no one else has
yeah.
anything less, and we only have 4 in launch. Do either of you guys have something you wanted to talk about?
Go ahead, Tom. You go first.
I'm going to leave you with the second one on the list because I know you just love those updates, the naming convention thereof. OneDrive, updated files on demand settings for Windows. So this is basically updating the OneDrive sync client for files on demand for users who have the feature enabled. And that is the feature that in effect says, hey, everybody that I send this to, send me your timesheet document or whatever. And it gives them a link to a folder in your OneDrive, and people can send to that folder to put their document in there, but they can only see their own item. They can't see anybody else's, but you don't have to go through and say, did they send it to me in an email? Did they send it to me in a folder somewhere? It all keeps it in one place. Well, now they're updating the sync file settings for that in the OneDrive sync client. So good enough, you should have it. And it was to everybody, so.
Great. Well, I'll take Minecraft Education Wild Update 1.19. So anything that Microsoft does for education, I'm just tickled about. So this is even a great description. Get ready for the wild update for Minecraft Education with useful new blocks and items, charismatic mobs, and mangrove swamps. Explore and survive in an amazing new world. This update improves the user experience with smoother sign-in, library search, and tool tips.
I so want them to roll charismatic mobs out to teams. That's all I can say.
What do you have, Madam?
Matt. So funnily enough, my mom calls me Madam all the time because my brother's name is Matt. So that is the amalgamation of both of our names. So since I haven't lived at home for forever now too, if my mom ever gets frustrated because I'm like teasing her or something, she'll call me the dog's name because like that's her default. like oh, stop doing that silly. Yeah. But anyways, the only thing I think is probably worth mentioning, similar to what I explained earlier with the advanced deployment guide, now launched for everyone worldwide should be a records management advanced deployment guide. So if you're going through the process right now of trying to figure out how to handle your data and how to classify it and everything, Microsoft invested and put together an advanced deployment guide. And like I said, those are pretty robust normally and pretty good content. So if you're going through that journey, just Google it. It's probably available through your admin center, but definitely probably worth checking out.
Cool.
And there are no canceled today, so that will be it for the Pulse. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed joining us. I think today's episode was fun. We had more of a discussion about some topics than we normally do, but I think that was entertaining. I also am really excited about seeing where ChatGPT and a learned language model and all that integration is coming. I think we're really starting to see some of the direction Microsoft plans on taking that to enhance their current products. And to be honest, for me, even as someone, I think in general, I'm pretty good at being a early technology adopter with a lot of stuff just because I like technology and going through and doing. Where I really see excitement for myself personally at ChatGPT is not necessarily like me leveraging ChatGPT to write a paper for me or put a presentation together. Like, that's cool. It's an interesting concept. It's Microsoft embedding the learn language model and machine learning AI capabilities they have to augment and enhance the tools and the experiences I'm already using in a way on the back end that I don't necessarily have to modify how I'm going through and doing it, but it just gives me more relevant, more up to date, more easily accessible information. And that in and of itself, I think is awesome because you're seeing Microsoft's development and enhancements in a technology set really bring up to snuff some of their other areas that we depend on and rely on. And I think that that's the way to do it. If you're Microsoft, you're essentially using the platform of learn language model and AI to enhance everything that you're doing, which basically just drives value across the board. So super excited about that.
Well, I'm looking at some of the the Copilot stuff that they were talking about, like for Excel. I am horrible at Excel, know very little about Excel. But if you gave me a spreadsheet, I could say, okay, format this spreadsheet to show me everything by region. And it's going to go through and set it up in a table and do the region. I'm like, oh, and can you also do sub breakouts by city within the region? Boom, there you go. I'm like, wow, that would take me like 3/4 of a day to look up how to do all this stuff. And I don't even know what I don't know to get there. Now it's putting it into a format where it's like, okay, this looks like it gives me everything I need. I may want to do a reality check on it at some point, but
Right.
it gets me what I need to see out there.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
awesome.
it's really just going to allow us to take advantage of all the powerful aspects of all the tools that Microsoft has put out there
Yeah.
without having to have in-depth knowledge of all of
Yeah.
the tools because it's so big now. You can't do that anymore. You've
Yeah.
got to specialize in something.
Well, I mean, even just like M365 as a whole, like essentially I run a team of M365 experts. And I even consider myself to be probably a 300 or 400 level of almost every technology that's related to M365. You can't hire someone that has like that's not a thing anymore. Like, you need to hire someone who, okay, they're subject matter expertise in this one thing and they have competency in the other areas, because it's growing so much. And
And so
the
fast.
diversification of feature sets they're rolling out in the specific areas. I mean, I spent the last part of the reason I haven't been on all these meetings, I spent the last 3 months deeply diving into Windows 10 device management and doing stuff with laptops and stuff like that, which is an area that like I was comfortable with before but hadn't done a ton. And like that's taken me basically 3 months to get in and get my handle on with everything and go in and do the testing and everything like that. And it's just it's ridiculous. And so seeing that, I completely agree with you, Tamara. I am excited to see where Microsoft chooses to leverage what is a diversification and clearly like intelligence collateral that they have to make people like us, let's be honest, and people like would be the people that listen to the show, to make their jobs easier, to make the information more accessible, to make it more approachable. And to their credit, Microsoft's done that pretty well over the last little bit. Half the updates we talked about today are about doing stuff to make it more approachable to the small guy, make it to someone who doesn't have, the money out there to hire a $250,000 a year security officer for your company. They still at least give you framework and tools and stuff you can go through and do. So I'm excited to see what the future has to hold.
I think it's really going to train people to ask questions.
Yes.
And to ask questions succinctly so that the AI can interpret what you want and provide you the results you're looking for.
Yep.
So if you're good at Google, your life is going to get better.
Well, and there's an actual skill set now, especially in the world of AI engineering, which is a prompt engineer. And it's learning how to ask questions of the AI in such a way that you get the answers that you're expecting, and how you tweak your AI.
Well, the dumber
To
version of this
respond.
has existed for forever. I explicitly ask a message every time I'm doing interviews for people, where I basically come up with a scenario where the person doesn't know the answer, and I ask them how are they going to approach that, what are they going to do, And the answer I'm looking for is Google it. Like I want someone who can say, "Oh, I don't know the answer, but I have this giant fucking thing called the internet that has the answer, and I know how to go through and leverage that to get the information I need." And like all of us work in essentially an IT field. Like I'm sure all three of us are essentially Google wizards to our family because you've learned and over time figured out how to go out and find the information, how to term your queries in a way that gives you the feedback and the information that you need. And like that is a fundamental skill, and that's going to get even more prevalent as we go through and do this. And Tom, as you're talking about using AI to leverage going through and doing that information, like and people prompting the AI, Microsoft's going to take that information and make getting that easier for the average person as well too. So yeah, good things. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. This was a little bit more of a rambly episode than we normally have, but it was fun. I hope everyone has a good rest of their week, and we'll see you guys next week for the Pulse.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.